I've got Brad Garlinghouse and David Schwartz talking about Ripple's future and where they are heading. This is very important because with XRP being one of the biggest assets in the crypto industry, right? Ripple working on moving billions and billions of dollars, eventually trillions of dollars a day. I think it's really important to stop and have a moment and talk about where the people that are guiding the ship are heading the company. And so let's go ahead and jump into this.
So, David, where are we today? How does the current state of the XRPL align with the vision you guys had when you first started this back in 2011?
You know, it's been interesting. There have been things that have kind of come out the way that I think that I anticipated, and things that have just been completely wildly outside of my anticipation. I think the way in which there would be...
Actually, can I interrupt you? I was like, can you guys hear him okay? Yeah. All right, just making sure. Great.
I think one of the things is institutional adoption has been sort of a little different than we anticipated. I think in some ways it's been slower than we thought. In some ways it's been much faster. I think institutional adoption from like non-financial institutions and non-financial companies has kind of been slow. I think we probably would have expected more of a bottom-up adoption where like ordinary people would be using crypto first, like democratized remittances, for example, and that kind of didn't happen. But I think what did happen that's interesting is the sort of financial system was sort of ripe for adopting it. The way I think about it is tech has like absorbed other industries, like tech ate retail through companies like Amazon, and tech ate music with digital downloads and streaming services, and I think tech is coming for finance, and I think we're seeing that with the institutional DeFi that we're seeing today. And these are extremely interesting because they're institutional adoption, but they're not just like Ripple was really early with institutional adoption for payments, but that wasn't institutions that brought their customers to the blockchain, right? The customer just made a payment and the customer didn't know where.
Yeah,
exactly. What I think we're just starting to see now is institutions that are doing things like issuing stable coins or tokenizing real world assets, and they're actually bringing their customers to these layer one blockchains. And I think that's an interesting model for mass adoption that I think we're just starting to see right now.
But so when you think about the vision and even, we'll talk, and I'm going off script a bit. We're supposed to cover certain things, but I already warned the team that we might go anywhere here.
Who's going to criticize him, right?
They can't yell at me. You can just yell at me. But I'm genuinely curious when, the original ideas of starting the XRP ledger, like what were some of the reasons you felt like, hey, we can build a better blockchain for payments? Like, just talk about maybe some of those early conversations of how it started.
I think the very earliest conception that we had is Bitcoin had just hit the public eye, and we had just started to learn about it. And I think one of the things that we realized is that even if you thought, as many people did at the time, that like Bitcoin would just take over the world, it's like many other things. Like you have a new religion, you think, well, if everybody just believed the same religion, it'd be great. But that could be, any payment network would be great if everybody in the world had access to it. Right. And we started to realize that this idea that Bitcoin would somehow solve interoperability because everybody would use it for everything was just as naive as believing that any payment system would sort of solve interoperability.
Right.
So what we started to look at with the XRP ledger at first was we thought that proof of work wasn't really going to work out. We were kind of ahead of time. So the first cracks were appearing in that narrative. And the other thing that we realized is like 99.99% of the world's value wasn't in blockchain at the time and wasn't going to be in the very near term. And so there had to be, I guess what we call today bridges, there had to be connectivity. And so one of the very first things that we built into the XRP ledger was issued assets, what we call stable coins today, and a DEX, and this sort of multi-asset. The idea that you would use the blockchain for settlement, but that it wouldn't necessarily just be a native cryptocurrency.
Yeah, it strikes me as someone who wasn't there at the very beginning that the foresight you all had around things like a DEX, an AMM, that really, it was way ahead. And I think, in my opinion, the XRP ledger doesn't get enough credit for, which I guess I hear you saying it really was born of the belief that if 99.9% of all value is not on chain, you have to find ways to actually get it on chain, make it liquid, make it accessible.
Yeah, it's funny that those concepts...
Really quickly, so this is 12, 13 years ago now, right? They understood, David Schwartz, Arthur Brito, Jed McCaleb, and the team that were building out this future of how money was going to move around the planet. They understood that, hey, Bitcoin has some issues and has some challenges. And what we need to do is address those challenges. And even looking back now, it's incredible how they decided to put in an AMM, right? Decided to create something that you could really put any type of value, right, from around the world into the XRP ledger and have it be transacted in just a few seconds for a very little fee, right? This is something that's way ahead of its time. And you probably had the smartest people on the planet working on the XRP ledger in blockchain at the time that XRP was created. Like, it doesn't get better than this looking back, right? It's exciting. It's really exciting.
Like, have names now. And at the time, we didn't call it a DEX, but like we built a DEX in 2012. We didn't call them stable coins, but we had stable coins in the very early releases. And we also had something that is not radical at this time, but was radical then, which was accounts that you could manage. With Bitcoin, like if you have a receiving address and you want to change that receiving address because you want to manage your funds differently, you want to change like who can receive your payments, you have to give everybody a new address. It's very difficult to advertise this. This idea that an account being a thing that you could have and manage, which is alien to Bitcoin, but of course Ethereum is built around that concept. So yeah, it was kind of interesting watching, as the technology unfurled and some of those concepts. So Ethereum staked out its own place in the landscape.
Yeah, there's rumors out there that Vitalik he was an intern at Ripple before I was at Ripple. To tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so sad.
By the way, we are way off script.
Whatever. It doesn't. It's so sad that didn't work out. I mean, can you imagine the great things Vitalik could have accomplished at Ripple? No, but seriously, though, Vitalik had some great ideas about smart contracts on layer one. And at one point, he stayed on Stefan's couch, our CTO at the time, and he shared his ideas. And we were obviously very, very impressed that, he had a clear vision, not that far ahead of its time, as it turned out. And he actually, Stefan, Thomas, myself, Arthur Brito at times, and Vitalik talked about like bringing layer one smart contracts to our design. And interestingly enough, there were a variety of reasons why we didn't grab onto that idea back then. I guess you could argue we're a little late to the party talking about that now. But I think, it would have been, it's an interesting counterfactual to imagine if Vitalik had persuaded Stefan, Arthur, and I to build smart contracts into layer one on the XRP ledger in the early days. But I think what we were concerned with is that it would, and you can see this with Ethereum, that it causes the transaction fees to go up and it reduces the transactions per second, and it does have costs. And obviously you can argue about, obviously it has benefits as well.
Well, so maybe I'm transitioning back to some of the stuff we were supposed to cover.
I'm wondering if they understood who they wanted their customer to be way back when, right? They wanted their customers to be financial institutions and banks. They didn't really care about retail kind of having their say, right? Because when you look at Ethereum, right? If anyone remembers how expensive Ethereum used to be compared to what it is today, it's not even close, right? I used to pay tens of thousands of dollars in gas fees when it came to Ethereum back in 2021. All right. If you weren't around during that bull market, a lot of stuff was happening on Ethereum. There were some node projects that I was invested in. And every time I would go to claim those nodes, I would have to pay $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 just to claim the value on those nodes. And the value was a few $100,000. So don't get me wrong. I was definitely making money at the time, but can you imagine just on a larger scale, thinking about the overall population, like people that don't have tens of thousands of dollars to pay on gas fees, like how that network was really not designed for everybody at the time. Now, Ethereum has gotten way cheaper with the advances over time, but still, I like how David Schwartz and the team understood that, hey, we don't need to make smart contracts and have everybody building on the XRP ledger. We really want to aim this towards financial institutions and banks. And I think they've stuck true to that. Now, are they going to expand smart contract functionality in the future? And I think, that's some of the stuff that they're working on currently. But, I think they kind of stayed true to what they were trying to build at the time.
Obviously, I'm sure most people here saw that earlier today, we announced our support and our belief around smart contract programmability and bringing that to the XRPL via kind of EVM sidechain, as well as exploring options for mainnet. What was it that changed your view? Because historically, that's something we have not leaned into as a company. Obviously, the XRPL community can do things independent of us, but what was it for you that made you feel like, hey, this is something we should support going forward?
It was a couple of things. I think one of them was I didn't think that a chain that wasn't built for smart contracts from the ground up could compete as a smart contract chain with chains like the EVM sidechain that are built for, programmability from the ground up. And I think the other factor was that if you build a new type of smart contracts, nobody knows how to use them. And so you sort of have to build an ecosystem from the ground up. Whereas like with EVM compatibility, it's all already there. And Abradism, the tyranny of or versus the power of and. As long as there's no disadvantages to adopting smart contracts on layer one, then and is always a good answer. And so my concern was that there were some disadvantages to adopting smart contracts right at layer one. Fee instability, loss of transactions per second, and also just sort of data bloat. If you have a useful smart contract, it has to have a lot of information. And so those were the reasons why historically I didn't think smart contracts on the XRP ledger layer one made sense, because it couldn't compete with smart contract platforms. A couple of things have changed my opinion very recently, but I think the big one is that not being able to compete as a smart contract platform with like an EVM chain is like the wrong mental model to have. The question is not, does it allow you, it's like, I don't know, adding more cargo capacity to a car. Can it compete with a truck? Probably not. But still, there's people who like to carry around a lot of stuff in their cars, and being able to carry around more stuff is good.
Right.
And so I think what convinced me was people who said, look, your AMM implementation is great, but it doesn't do exactly what I need. Your NFT implementation is great, but it doesn't have this weird thing that I need. And if you gave me just a little bit of smart contract capability, just a little bit, not the whole thing, you're not trying to compete as the best smart contract platform, but you're trying to say, instead of being able to target 80% of the use cases with fixed function transactors, we can target 80% and then maybe another 15% with just a little bit of smart contracts. And then if we get confidence it's working well, TPS is okay, fees are stable, then we can add more and have a base to build off of. And that argument was persuasive with me. And I have to credit Legato at Orchestra Finance, who basically championed that argument with me and put the effort in to sort of walk me through his thinking, and he was very persuasive.
One of the many examples, I think, of how it does take a village, it takes a community, and certainly Ripple has been and will continue to be a very interested party in the success of XRPL. But I think that the fact that this came from kind of outside and influenced your thinking about it, I think is super important, and I think we'll continue to show some flexibility, I think, on our thinking about, where does the future of the XRPL go and what which support. Before we leave some of this topic, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I touched briefly on the automated market maker, AMM, as something that also has been, more investment in, more attention around more recently. Share your thoughts on why that's critical to the future of, I guess, DeFi and, where the XRPL is.
That it does a lot of different things. Most people's focus on the automated market maker is that it provides additional liquidity. That's important in a lot of cases. So we have a DEX already that has a central limit order book. So it's not like there's no liquidity. So on many platforms, there's no other way to get liquidity. But they have different strengths and weaknesses. An order book is really good for very popular pairs, like, XRP to RLUSD when RLUSD is launched. Probably the order book will be pretty good for that.
We'll talk more about RLUSD.
There'll be liquidity there. It'll be good for, it'll be pretty good for exchange, but you have a long tail. So let's say there's hundreds of smaller projects that have assets. You have real world assets, tokenized real world assets. The AMM doesn't require somebody to actively be placing offers into an order book. And so imagining thousands of active markets with, traders placing offers is just unrealistic. The other interesting thing about the AMM is that assets like XRP are very volatile. The AMM actually executes a trading strategy on behalf of the people who provide liquidity to the AMM. And so it's an opportunity to get passive yield from the volatility, and that also helps to reduce the volatility, which makes digital assets like more viable financial products. But also, I think it's like the cornerstone of a DeFi ecosystem. Like it's the base of most of the DeFi ecosystems on many other chains. So, and of course, it has the continuous auction mechanism, which I don't know how many of you know about that, but it's a unique feature that reduces impermanent loss and gets a better yield for the token holders. So I think it's a great package.
All right, guys, I'm going to make a part 2 of this, right? There's another 12 minutes, and I want to get into some other details about this, but don't want the video to go too long here. So definitely stay tuned for part 2. It'll be coming out probably within the next 24 hours after you see this one. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you want to join a active crypto community, please think about joining Cryptonairz. There is a link down in the description. You can use code BULLRUN to save 50% off to the end of the year. Guys, there's so much happening in there. We have KOLs from across the space posting charts, posting projects they're interested in, posting alpha information that you normally wouldn't see there on Twitter. Definitely someplace you want to be is Cryptonairz. I'll see you there. Aloha. Bye. I've got David Schwartz and Brad Garlinghouse talking about the early days of the XRP ledger, even when Vitalik Buterin was sleeping on the couch of one of the Ripple developers. There's so much information in here. We're also going to talk about AMMs and the future of XRP in this video. I'm sure you are going to get a kick out of this. When you have Brad Garlinghouse and David Schwartz on the same stage, magic happens. Let's go ahead and get into the video.